Hi, Alan Schimmel, DevOps.com, here for DevOps.com's DevOps TV at Does 16. Happy to be joined by a repeat interviewer, Pauly Comtois of Hearst Publications.
That's right, Hearst Business Media.
Hearst Business Media. I guess we're in a new world where it's not just publications
Right,
anymore.
that's true. The world is evolving, isn't it?
Yes, it has. So, Pauly, first of all, welcome back to
Thank you.
DevOps.com and DevOps TV. This is your second or third year presenting?
It's the second year presenting. Very excited to be back.
Yep, and of course, last year, Pauly, you presented about sort of Hearst, and Hearst is not a funny company, but Hearst is a company with many different divisions. And you had kicked off some DevOps initiatives at several of these divisions, and it really, in some ways, was sort of a living lab, right? Because what you did at one, do something else at a different one, and so forth. But you're back this year with an update, and why don't you share with us a little bit about kind of what that update is?
Sure, absolutely. Really, we focused originally on creating sort of a grassroots groundswell with the individual contributors. Each individual business unit runs autonomously and operates very, very effectively in that manner. But we saw an opportunity to start building a community across all of the business units. And to a large degree, the executives already communicate across business unit lines, but the engineers are so heads down and focused on what they're doing that there wasn't a lot of time for that, and there wasn't really a medium for it either. And DevOps is kind of the perfect vehicle for creating this sort of community from the ground up, and that worked very well, and it's been very successful. We've seen a lot of sort of self-forming cross-functional teams through Slack and through other initiatives to bring them together, book clubs and podcasts, and it's just really creating the opportunity and then letting that happen organically. And over the last year, we realized, or I should say I realized, that I was sort of leaving a tier out of this reckoning, and I had already brought the executives in on this, and I already brought the individual contributors, and we were working really hard, and things were going very well. Unfortunately, I didn't really put enough focus and effort on the middle, so the middle management tier. As it turns out, the initiative took off very well and then kind of stalled, or at the very least it stopped growing the way that I expected it to, and it turned out the friction was from the middle, not from the uptake from the bottom. And so that's been my focus over the last year and a half, is really
bringing the middle in.
Right, and kind of getting an understanding of why were you not coming along to begin with. There was probably a reason for that.
Well, there's a couple of things with that, Pauly. First of all, we have seen, or I have heard, in other DevOps transformation stories or journeys, especially with large organizations, that sometimes that middle layer, that middle management layer, can be resistant because if people are doing their DevOps thing and we're automating stuff, and you get your direction from up high, it kind of leaves the traditional middleware or the middle layer maybe feeling a little left out. And so you do run into a little friction in there, number one. But number two, Pauly, I think what you're describing is another common thing we see in organizations' DevOps transformations, and that's what I call pockets of DevOps, right? And how do we bring these pockets together like bubbles into a big bubble? And to me, and I guess this is exactly what you're describing, that's the crux at the enterprise level of, it almost seems to me like, look, anybody could grab a little team of 3 or 4 people and institute some DevOps stuff. How am I rolling this out to thousands of engineers, thousands of developers and ops folks? That's what separates the horses from the ponies, if you will, in gene liturgy, right?
Right. I agree. And it's definitely much more difficult without sort of the middle tier, and the reason for that is the middle manager has the unique visibility over all of the teams, and if you can coerce, or influence alignment.
Coerce is a bad word.
That's a terrible word.
Right.
So sometimes you have
to do what you have to do.
In order to get the flywheel going, sometimes you have to push harder. And what that could be is just as simple as trying to find an alignment for incentives and goals. And doing that with 2,000 people or doing it with 20, it's a little easier to start with 20.
Yes.
The good news for us is that we already have that across the individual contributors. And so all we have to do is to really allay and ease that fear that the middle manager is being DevOpsed out of a job. In some cases, it does mean that role may change a little bit, but it doesn't mean you're not still the right person for that role.
Sure.
It just means that we now need to evolve with the organization and the ecosystem. As DevOps evolves, we need to evolve with it. And again, that's also not to say that there aren't organizations that still have sort of stalwart middle managers that still do a very good job at managing things, but not necessarily leading change.
Right, but to be fair, middle managers generally don't lead change. They carry out orders and get things going. They don't lead that change.
Right.
So, asking or expecting them to might be a case of, asking a lion to have stripes.
Right.
The tigers have stripes.
Right, or a cat to bark, right?
Right.
But that's okay. The difference there is that we work with them to start the evolution in themselves as well. I think that you're right. If you just throw that expectation out there, or even worse yet, go up to that individual and say, why are you failing at this? You were so good at everything else. Why are you not great at this? And, what are we doing as leaders
to enable them
exactly and help them and help them grow?
I agree with you 100%. This is also a topic that I've seen Gary Groover address. I don't know if you're familiar with Gary.
I am, yeah.
Leading the transformation. He actually has a new book out that we interviewed him about today. But, in leading the transformation, he also has had some experiences both at Macy's and HP Printer on again, if you don't get that mid-management layer on your team, on your side, you're doomed for failure. Unless you're going to cut them out altogether, which is not a smart idea in a large organization. So, Pauly, where if you had to rate your success of now engaging the middle layer on, let's say, a scale of 1 to 10?
I'd probably say we're probably about an 8 at this point.
That's great.
Yeah, I think really it's just the concerted effort. And not to say that happened overnight, of course. We didn't get to 8 right away. It's taken a year and a half to get there. And it is to say that there are still some folks that still live in a fear-based economy where the concern is something's going to happen and I'm going to be out of a job. And that I'm not sure that you can, as an outsider, you can fully remove that from an individual. The fear is just sort of part of life. It's part of going to work and concern. Unfortunately, middle managers have been conditioned to be afraid of losing their job. They're in an M&A or a merger. The middle tier is usually the first one to get heavily cut. And so we kind of prepare them for that instead of saying, hey, you're part of this change, this evolution is not just the bottom and the top, it's the entire organization. And so I think it's a lofty goal to try and get to 100%, but
no.
But it's what you shoot for.
You've got
right?
to strive for it, because if you're not shooting for 100%, I learned I had an assistant principal in middle school, Mrs. Smith, and she used to say, you must reach for the stars, because if you reach for the stars and only get to the planets, you did good. But if you're not reaching for the stars, you're never going to get to the planets.
That's exactly right.
And it's the same thing with this, and I think that's a worthy goal, right?
Absolutely.
Because at some level, also, I think people need to remember that DevOps isn't the end; it's the journey, right? And so I don't ever want to hear, "I made my goal."
Right.
My DevOps is done. It's cooked.
Yeah.
It's never done. It's never done. There's always more to reach for.
Absolutely. Adam Jacob recently said, I don't know anyone that's 100% DevOps. That company doesn't exist. And that's actually not a bad thing.
No.
How far are you on your journey? And the fact that you're even on the journey and really being sort of introspective and thinking about where you are and where you're going, that's really the important part.
It is. Pauly, it's always a pleasure to have you.
It's always great to see you too.
Yep. And look forward to hearing more about your continued 5-year mission to explore strange new IT landscapes.
Absolutely.
Where no man or woman has gone before.
Thank you.
Pauly Comtois, Hearst Media.
Hearst, yep.
And joining us here today on DevOps TV. This is Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com's DevOps TV.